The first shovel of dirt struck my coffin lid with a hollow thud, echoing through the darkness as clearly as the betrayal that still pulls like poison through my veins. My eyes flew open, my heartbeat thundered wildly, trapped inside the nightmare they'd crafted just for me. I gasped for air, but there was only the crushing silence, the deafening stillness, and that single terrifying realization. I was buried alive by my own family. The air grew thinner, each breath feeling more precious than the last. Flashbacks assaulted my mind relentlessly. My sister Haley's voice echoed sweetly, promising she'd always protect me. Leroy's laughter as we shared late-night stories under starlit skies. My parents smiling lovingly during my graduation, every beautiful memory now twisted into mockery. They'd planned this carefully, each affectionate gesture a step toward my doom, disguising their greed behind perfect smiles. As panic clawed at my chest, a memory broke through clearly the night I overheard Mom whispering coldly, "Frederick is worthless alive, but his insurance will secure our future." Haley's eager voice quickly agreed, a chilling harmony between mother and daughter. Leroy's awkward silence the day he drove me out to the lonely road suddenly made horrible sense. He'd turned away, unable to face me as headlights flashed violently into view, sending my world spinning into darkness. Pain sliced through my head as the truth slammed home. My family had faked my death to claim the insurance money, leaving me for dead. Rage replaced fear, a furious determination burning fiercely inside me. If fate had somehow granted me another chance, if I'd been reborn into this waking nightmare then. Justice was my only purpose now. They'd dug my grave thinking they'd buried their problems along with my heartbeat, but they'd underestimated my will to survive. With fists clenched, I forced myself upward, pushing desperately against the wooden coffin lid until I heard splintering cracks. Dirt poured in as my fingers clawed toward freedom, my muscles screaming in agony. But every second brought clarity. My family, standing above ground, would soon face the horror they'd inflicted upon me. Breaking through the final barrier, I gasped, inhaling cold, fresh air, my eyes fixed on the night sky. Above, stars glittered mercilessly as dirt cascaded around my shoulders. Their lies had buried me, but their fear would resurrect my truth. From this grave they'd forced upon me, I would rise and my vengeance would bury them. Frederick had always known there was something missing in the warmth his family portrayed. Born into what seemed a picturesque household, well-maintained lawns, charming smiles, and perfect Sunday dinners, he felt like the stray brushstroke on an otherwise flawless painting. Tall and slender, with sharp, thoughtful eyes and a quiet demeanor, Frederick had a passion for writing that none of his family members ever bothered to understand. Every beautifully crafted poem or heartfelt short story was dismissed with polite nods, his parents always rushing off to attend to Haley's countless recitals, performances, and pageants. Haley, his younger sister by just 2 years, was the epitome of charm. With golden hair falling softly over her shoulders and sparkling eyes that captured everyone effortlessly, Haley knew exactly how to wield her charm. To outsiders, she was an angel, beautiful, talented, and gracious. But Frederick saw the reality. Beneath, she was calculated, her every action driven by an intense desire to maintain her spot as the family's brightest star. Their parents adored Haley, proudly boasting about her latest achievements at dinners and gatherings, while Frederick's quieter, introspective accomplishments faded into the background. Their relationship wasn't always distant. In childhood, Frederick had genuinely adored Haley. He would often stay awake late at night, helping her rehearse lines for a school play, or comforting her when she was nervous before a dance competition. Back then, Haley's affection felt genuine, and Frederick cherished being the supportive older brother who shielded her from disappointment. But as they grew older, that bond eroded, replaced by Haley's competitive edge and their parents' favoritism that created an invisible wedge between them. The distance had intensified as Haley became the family's symbol of success, winning medals, scholarships, and trophies. Frederick soon realized he had become a mere spectator, politely clapping from the sidelines as Haley's star rose. Yet, he didn't resent her. Instead, he quietly accepted that perhaps his path was meant to be different. He found solace in his writing poetry and stories that mirrored his quiet observations and deep feelings. His room became a sanctuary filled with neatly arranged notebooks, every page inked with the emotions he couldn't share elsewhere. Leroy was the only person Frederick trusted fully. They had been inseparable since childhood, playing in muddy fields, sharing secrets beneath old oak trees, and navigating adolescence side by side. Leroy had a boisterous laugh that could instantly ease Frederick's quiet anxieties. When Leroy's family struggled financially, Frederick would quietly leave extra groceries on his doorstep, never asking for acknowledgement. In return, Leroy had always seemed fiercely loyal, often protecting Frederick from school bullies or teasing classmates who saw his introverted nature as weakness. But recently, even Leroy had started acting strange, withdrawn, avoiding Frederick's eyes during their conversations. Frederick brushed off these unsettling feelings, blaming it on his own imagination. Leroy was family. After all, he wouldn't abandon Frederick, no matter what. But Frederick couldn't ignore the quiet tension that hung between them, thick and heavy, like an approaching storm. The tipping point came the evening Frederick overheard voices coming from the kitchen, hushed whispers drifting through the silence of their house. Standing hidden near the staircase, Frederick froze as he listened closely, a sickening feeling crawling up his spine. Frederick's worth more dead than alive, he heard his mother say plainly, her voice devoid of emotion. Think of the life Haley could have if we cash in on his policy. His father replied calmly, almost casually. He's always been a burden. Haley deserves better opportunities. Frederick's blood ran cold, his knees weak beneath him. His heart pounded violently, disbelief mixing with betrayal and hurt. He slipped silently back into his room, gripping the edge of his desk to steady himself. The family he'd believed in, supported quietly for years, his parents, who had once kissed him goodnight and read him bedtime stories, his sister who'd giggled with him under blankets on stormy nights, they had decided he was disposable. In the days after overhearing that terrible conversation, Frederick felt like a ghost haunting his own life. Every glance from his parents, every forced smile from Haley, felt sinister now. He began to question every happy memory, every moment of affection from them. Had they ever truly loved him, or had he been blind to the truth? Then Leroy approached Frederick with his uneasy smile, inviting him for an evening drive. Frederick hesitated at first, instincts shouting caution, but Leroy had always been his anchor. Maybe, just maybe, he had misunderstood Leroy's recent behavior. Perhaps Leroy could help him find clarity amid the nightmare that now shadowed him. So Frederick agreed, climbing into Leroy's car that night, watching familiar streets slip away under fading sunlight. As Leroy drove silently toward the outskirts, tension settled heavily around them. Frederick tried small talk, but Leroy's clipped responses soon plunged them back into uncomfortable silence. Anxiety knotted in Frederick's chest, the trust he once had in his best friend fracturing. Then, out of nowhere, Leroy spoke, voice shaking slightly. Frederick, there's something. But before Leroy could finish, a blinding pair of headlights appeared ahead, accelerating toward them to fast, to close. Leroy jerked the wheel sharply, and Frederick's world spun out of control, metal screeching against metal, glass shattering, pain exploding through him. In the chaos, a single thought pierced Frederick's fading consciousness. Leroy had been complicit. He'd known what was coming and hadn't stopped it. As darkness swallowed him whole, Frederick felt one final sting of betrayal, harsher than any he'd imagined possible. But fate, cruel yet strangely merciful, was not finished with him. Moments later, or perhaps a lifetime later, Frederick awoke gasping for breath, pain still searing through his body. The fire of betrayal ignited something fierce inside him, a cold determination burning brighter than ever. Frederick was no longer the quiet boy who lived in Haley's shadow. He had been given a second chance, a rebirth from the darkness imposed upon him by the people he'd trusted most. And this time, he was ready to claim justice from the family who had plotted his demise, the sister who feigned innocence, and the friend who had betrayed his loyalty. In the quiet of that fateful night, Frederick finally understood his purpose. He would no longer be the unseen shadow. Instead, he'd rise and ensure that those who dug his grave would be the ones forced to face their buried secrets. Frederick woke up in a stark hospital room, lights harshly piercing his vision as confusion clouded his mind. His body throbbed in pain, limbs stiff, skin raw. Memories returned in scattered fragments. Leroy's uneasy glances, Haley's whispered exchanges, his parents' cold discussion about insurance. A profound sense of dread settled deep within him as reality sank in. Struggling upright, Frederick glanced around, noting that the hospital room felt oddly empty. No cards, no flowers, no concerned family members, just clinical silence and the steady beep of monitors. His heartbeat quickened as he noticed the nurse who entered seemed startled too. "See him conscious. You're awake," she remarked softly, clearly surprised. "We weren't expecting you to recover this quickly." Frederick stared at her in confusion. "What happened? Was there an accident?" She hesitated briefly before replying gently. "Your friend Leroy brought you here, after your car crashed. You've been in a coma for nearly 2 weeks." Frederick's head spun as he processed her words. "Did my family come to see me?" Again, the hesitation, more pronounced this time. "They came once. I haven't seen them since." His stomach twisted painfully, suspicion gnawing at him. His parents' whispered conversation haunted him, their callous words about the life insurance echoing in his mind. Frederick realized with bitter clarity he wasn't supposed to have survived. Days passed with Frederick, piecing together the chilling truth. His parents hadn't visited again, nor had Haley. The absence spoke volumes, amplifying the betrayal that tore through him. Leroy had vanished as well, leaving Frederick isolated and vulnerable. Yet the more he considered Leroy's odd behavior, the clearer the betrayal became. Leroy hadn't just known about the accident, he'd orchestrated it. One evening, while still confined to his hospital bed, Frederick overheard hushed voices outside his door. His heart jolted as he recognized Haley's familiar melodic tone. "He's awake?" Haley whispered sharply, urgency in her voice. "Yes," the nurse responded cautiously. "It's remarkable." There was silence, heavy and oppressive, before Haley spoke again, colder this time. "Please inform us before you discharge him. The family would prefer a discreet handling of his recovery." Frederick's pulse raced. Discreet handling? Was Haley ensuring his silence, or worse, plotting to finish what they'd started? Late that night, when the hospital grew still, Frederick quietly slipped from bed, pulling 4 tubes from his bruised skin. Every step sent waves of agony through him, but desperation fueled his escape. He staggered down sterile hallways, heart hammering wildly, determined to confront the truth before it swallowed him alive. He hailed a taxi outside, instructing the driver to take him home. As familiar streets blurred past, Frederick's mind whirled with memories, each now tainted by the poison of betrayal. Arriving at his family home, he saw lights still glowing warmly inside, their cheerful brightness a sickening contrast to the darkness suffocating him. Silently entering through the back door, he overheard laughter drifting from the dining room. His family sat around a table filled with food, their expressions carefree, Haley chatting animatedly as his parents laughed affectionately. Frederick's chest tightened painfully, seeing them celebrate so openly while he'd lain alone in a hospital bed, broken and forgotten. "They'll finalize the claims soon," his father announced jovially, raising his glass. "Frederick's unfortunate accident finally gave us the break we needed." Haley's smile widened. "Perfect timing too. I've been accepted into the academy. Now nothing stands in our way." Frederick clenched his fists, nails biting painfully into his palms. The truth, so harshly exposed, was undeniable. He was merely a stepping stone, his life sacrificed for their ambitions. Fury mixed with heartbreak as he stood frozen, listening to the callous casualness of their betrayal. But the ultimate blow came when Leroy's voice echoed through the room. Frederick recoiled instinctively, the sting of Leroy's betrayal sharper than any physical pain. "Frederick trusted me completely." Leroy laughed uneasily, guilt evident, but dismissed quickly. "Made it easy. Never even saw it coming." Haley placed a hand reassuringly on Leroy's arm, smiling sweetly. "You did well. You deserve every penny." Frederick staggered backward, vision blurring with tears of anger. He'd lost everything: family, friendship, trust in one cruel moment. Retreating unnoticed, Frederick slipped back outside into the night, staggering blindly down empty streets, every step burning with anger, disbelief, and agony. Finding himself in a deserted park, Frederick collapsed onto a bench, sobbing uncontrollably. How could the people he'd loved most, the sister he'd protected, the best friend he'd trusted, discard him so ruthlessly? His entire existence felt shattered, worthless. The betrayal twisted within him, sharp and unrelenting. Hours passed beneath cold stars, grief slowly hardening into determination. Frederick wiped his eyes, realizing he couldn't stay broken forever. His family believed him gone, his death their ticket to success. But fate had different plans. He'd survived. Perhaps he'd been given a second chance, not only to live but to right the wrongs inflicted upon him. Dawn approached quietly, soft hues coloring the sky, reflecting the resolve that now burned fiercely inside him. Frederick had loved genuinely, trusted deeply, only to face the ultimate betrayal. But he wouldn't stay silent. They'd intended for him to die and disappear quietly. But his survival would be their undoing. Rising from the bench, Frederick felt a new strength surging within him. Haley's false innocence, Leroy's cowardly betrayal, his parents' cold calculations. He vowed to expose them all. They'd dug his grave, expecting him to lie quietly within it. Now, Frederick planned to force them to confront the darkness they'd created. He would turn their schemes against them, reclaiming his life and identity from the ashes they'd left behind. The boy who'd once hidden quietly in Haley's shadow, who trusted Leroy blindly and desperately sought parental approval, was gone. In his place stood someone who'd survived betrayal, risen from their greed-fueled fire, ready to demand justice. They had underestimated him once, dismissing him as weak and easily discarded. Now, he would become their greatest fear. Frederick, betrayed yet reborn, would ensure they paid the ultimate price for their treachery. Frederick's heart felt trapped, compressed beneath layers of betrayal, pain, and disillusionment. Each breath he took seemed heavier than the last, weighed down by confusion and anger that twisted relentlessly within him. He sat alone in the dim, silent park, shadows whispering around him, echoing the haunting words he had overheard earlier. The voices of his parents, Haley's deceptively sweet laughter, Leroy's nervous chuckle all reverberated in his ears like relentless accusations. He pressed his hands against his temples, fighting off waves of nausea as reality clawed at him mercilessly. He couldn't shake the images of Haley and Leroy exchanging smiles, of his parents calmly discussing the financial gain his death would bring them. Each memory burned deep scars, creating a tormenting loop of disbelief and rage. How could the people closest to him, those he'd trusted implicitly, discard him without remorse? It felt as though his entire life had unraveled, revealing itself as a cruel illusion, carefully constructed to keep him compliant and blind. Frederick's throat tightened, his vision blurring as tears spilled silently down his face. A profound loneliness enveloped him, a stark, cold isolation he'd never experienced before. His mind raced through memories, searching for signs he'd missed, subtle hints he'd overlooked. Had there ever been genuine warmth in his parents' hugs, sincerity in Haley's praises, truth in Leroy's friendship? Or had every affectionate gesture merely been a calculated step in their selfish plot? Self-doubt crept into Frederick's thoughts, whispering cruelly that perhaps he was indeed worthless, disposable. His family had found it easy to plot his death. After all, his dreams and passions, his quiet dedication to his writing, had always been ignored or ridiculed. Now, these dismissals appeared deliberate, calculated to keep him doubting his own worth, undermining his confidence, until he felt invisible even to himself. Yet, amid the suffocating darkness, a quiet spark ignited within Frederick, a flicker of defiance, stubbornly refusing to extinguish. His sadness began to transform into anger, raw and fierce. They'd counted on his silence, his compliance, but he wasn't the passive shadow they had imagined. He was alive, resilient, and ready to fight. Despite this newfound determination, fear continued to tug insistently at Frederick's mind. What if they discovered his survival before he could act? Would they try again, more ruthlessly this time? The thought sent chills cascading down his spine, his body trembling beneath the burden of anxiety. He knew he couldn't return home, not yet, but the idea of confronting them terrified him equally. Every scenario he envisioned filled him with dread, uncertainty chipping away at his fragile resolve. The suspense grew unbearable. Frederick could feel the ticking of an invisible clock pressing urgently against his thoughts, reminding him that every moment he wasted sitting there was another chance for them to cover their tracks, or worse, realize he was alive. Panic surged anew, his chest constricting painfully as he struggled to maintain control. He needed evidence, something concrete to protect himself, to prove their guilt. Yet the mere thought of facing them, of looking into their eyes while knowing their true nature, made his stomach churn violently. His hands shook uncontrollably as he considered Leroy, someone he'd once trusted implicitly. Memories of their shared laughter, late-night conversations, and quiet moments of genuine connection flooded Frederick's mind, making the betrayal sting even deeper. Had Leroy always been pretending? Had their entire friendship been a lie, built solely for this moment of deception? Frederick desperately wanted answers, even though the truth might break him further. As the hours stretched into the chill of night, Frederick wrestled with his overwhelming emotional turmoil, trapped between grief and rage, doubt and resolve. His heartbeat thundered in his ears, each pulse echoing his torment and uncertainty. Could he truly trust himself to face them, to expose the betrayal, to reclaim his dignity? Or would fear paralyze him, forcing him into hiding forever? He rose shakily from the bench, exhaustion pulling at his bones as his mind continued its relentless battle. Every step felt heavy, his body still battered from the accident that nearly claimed his life. But the physical pain paled compared to the emotional wounds inflicted by those closest to him. Despite everything, Frederick knew he couldn't run away forever. If he allowed fear and betrayal to silence him, they would win. Frederick's resolve slowly strengthened with each agonizing step forward, uncertainty gradually giving way to grim determination. Yes, the truth had broken him, shattered his trust, and forced him to confront ugly realities he wished never existed. But it had also freed him, stripping away false illusions to reveal a stark clarity he desperately needed. His family's greed had created their own enemy, someone they mistakenly believed to be weak and easily discarded. Suspense gnawed at him relentlessly, an unbearable tension tightening around his chest. The stakes were incredibly high. One wrong move could leave him more vulnerable than before. Yet, surrender was no longer an option. Frederick understood now that true survival demanded bravery, a willingness to confront painful truths head-on, and strength to reclaim control over his shattered world. The chill in the air deepened, mirroring Frederick's internal turmoil as he approached an unfamiliar motel, determined to find temporary refuge. Anxiety pulsed through him with every beat of his heart, but beneath that fear simmered a defiant hope, a belief that, despite everything, he could still rewrite his story. The family who had betrayed him might have stolen his past, but they couldn't rob him of his future. Their betrayal had wounded him deeply, but he was not destroyed. Frederick stepped forward with shaky confidence, his emotional struggles now intertwined with a desperate, fiery courage. He'd lived his entire life in quiet shadows, underestimated and overlooked. But now, forced into an unimaginable conflict by those he'd loved most, he would finally reveal the strength hidden within him all along. The suspense and dread still clawed insistently at his chest, but Frederick no longer allowed them control. He would reclaim his life, exposing every lie, every betrayal, and force those who had broken his heart to face justice. Frederick sat alone in the dim, cramped motel room, fingers nervously scrolling through messages and voicemails he'd previously ignored. Each notification felt like another weight pressing down, tightening the grip of anxiety around his chest. Then suddenly, his phone vibrated, a single text that made his blood run cold. "I know you're alive. Meet me at the old library at midnight alone. Leroy." Frederick's pulse quickened, panic mingling sharply with suspicion. His mind raced as he considered the message's implications. Leroy, who had been central to his betrayal, now wanted a clandestine meeting. It could be another trap, a dangerous attempt to finish what they'd started. But deep down, Frederick also saw an opportunity. Perhaps Leroy felt guilty, desperate to clear his conscience and help Frederick reveal the truth. As midnight approached, Frederick's dread intensified. Every shadow seemed to conceal threats, and the deserted street felt ominously quiet as he arrived at the abandoned library. Its once grand facade loomed eerily, cloaked in moonlight, the silence oppressive. Inside, he spotted Leroy pacing anxiously, silhouetted by faint moonbeams filtering through cracked windows. As Frederick approached, Leroy turned sharply, his eyes wide with guilt and fear. "Frederick, thank God," Leroy whispered, his voice trembling. "I wasn't sure you'd come. You betrayed me," Frederick growled, barely containing his rage. "Why should I trust you now?" Leroy raised his hands defensively, desperation etched across his features. "I didn't have a choice, Frederick. They threatened my family. I didn't want to do it. But your parents and Haley, they're capable of anything." Frederick hesitated, uncertainty flickering within him. Leroy's fear seemed genuine, his remorse apparent, but trusting him felt impossibly risky. "Why did you text me? Why risk meeting now?" "Because there's something worse," Leroy said, voice shaking. "They already cashed your insurance claim, Frederick. They think you survived, and they're desperate. Your family's not going to stop until you're truly gone." Frederick's stomach lurched, understanding the depth of his family's cruelty. What do you mean? They're planning another attempt? Leroy nodded slowly, eyes full of dread. Yes, but there's something else. They've framed you for embezzlement at your father's company. They planted evidence, creating an airtight case. If you're found alive, they'll ensure you spend your life in prison. Frederick's mind spun, overwhelmed by disbelief and anger. It wasn't enough that they'd betrayed him physically, now they'd destroy his reputation and future entirely. The realization hit hard. His own family was ready to condemn him to a fate worse than death. Why are you telling me this? Frederick asked, bitterness evident. Feeling guilty won't undo your part. Leroy's voice broke, sincerity coloring every word. Because I'm done helping them. They used me too, Frederick. Your parents promised protection for my family, but they're blackmailing us instead. I want redemption. I owe you that much. Frederick regarded Leroy warily, the gravity of the moment hanging between them. Then help me prove the truth. We have to expose everything they've done. Leroy took a deep breath, nodding solemnly. There's a safe in your father's office hidden behind the bookshelf. He keeps records, their documents about the insurance claim, bank transfers, and fabricated evidence. If you can get them, you'll have proof. But it's dangerous. Your family's paranoid. Security is tight. Frederick felt fear surge anew, knowing the risks were staggering. Yet determination solidified inside him. I don't have a choice. If I don't act now, they'll destroy my life completely. Leroy handed him a small key, his fingers trembling slightly. Use this, it opens the safe. I'm sorry for everything, Frederick. I'll understand if you never forgive me. Frederick took the key silently, recognizing its weight as more than metal. It was a symbol of trust, betrayal, redemption, and hope. Just help me fix this mess. It's the least you can do. Leaving the abandoned library, Frederick felt his heartbeat accelerate painfully. The second twist, this deeper betrayal cut sharper than before. His family hadn't simply discarded him. They'd meticulously plotted to erase him completely, leaving him either dead or condemned. The stakes had escalated dramatically, threatening not just his freedom, but his very existence. Determined, but terrified, Frederick knew he had one desperate chance left. Leroy's revelation had intensified the conflict, pushing Frederick to the edge of survival. It wasn't enough to survive now, he had to fight aggressively, strategically, to reclaim his life. The night sky stretched endlessly above, stars watching impassively as Frederick faced the bitter truth of his family's malevolence. But he refused to surrender. If they'd escalated their cruelty, he'd match it with unwavering courage. Frederick, wounded yet fiercely defiant, prepared for the battle ahead, knowing victory was uncertain, but defeat unacceptable. This second betrayal had wounded him deeply, yet also hardened his resolve. Now, he understood the full extent of their treachery, ready to confront it head-on. Frederick's heart thundered violently in his chest as he silently approached his family home. Darkness cloaked the familiar facade, casting long, ominous shadows across the carefully manicured lawn. His breathing came fast, shallow, adrenaline surging powerfully through him. Every step toward the house echoed the deep ache of betrayal he'd carried since waking in that hospital room. But beneath the pain simmered a fierce determination to end the deception once and for all. He slipped through the side entrance, the door clicking softly behind him. The hallway was bathed in dim moonlight, highlighting familiar family portraits, now grotesquely distorted by their lies. Frederick moved cautiously, ears attuned to every subtle sound. Upstairs, he heard faint laughter drifting down, a chilling reminder of his family's false normalcy. Entering his father's study, Frederick's hands trembled as he faced the large bookshelf Leroy had described. His heart pounded mercilessly. One mistake, one noise, would betray his presence. With careful movements, he pressed against the hidden latch Leroy had described, hearing a quiet click as the bookshelf swung open, revealing a small, recessed safe. He inserted the key Leroy had provided, turning it slowly, anxiously holding his breath. Inside were neatly arranged files and documents. Frederick's pulse quickened as he flipped through them: insurance claims, bank statements, even falsified police reports. Evidence proving not only his family's betrayal but also their attempts to frame him. Relief and triumph surged momentarily, but suddenly he froze. A creak of the floorboards behind him. His blood ran cold. Frederick, Haley's soft voice whispered menacingly, "Didn't you learn your lesson the first time?" He spun around sharply, gripping the files tightly, heart hammering with panic. Haley stood in the doorway, eyes gleaming dangerously, a mocking smile twisting her lips. Behind her, their parents appeared, faces tense with anger and surprise. "You survived," his father growled bitterly. "We underestimated your persistence." Frederick squared his shoulders defiantly. "You underestimated everything about me. How could you do this? Fake my death, betray me, frame me your own son." His mother stepped forward, eyes narrowing coldly. "We did what was necessary. Your existence was holding Haley back. Your insurance was worth more than your life ever would be." Her words sliced through Frederick painfully, but he maintained his composure. "You call yourselves parents? Destroying one child for another's success? Your cruelty is beyond comprehension." Haley laughed softly, chillingly. "Oh, Frederick, always so naive. Family is just a word. Power, success, that's all that matters." Leroy understood that. It's a pity his conscience got the better of him. Frederick felt a sudden dread grip him. "What did you do to Leroy?" Haley smirked, casually inspecting her nails. "He won't trouble us anymore. Unlike you, he wasn't strong enough to defy his fate." Frederick's chest tightened painfully, rage blending sharply with grief. He clenched his jaw, stepping forward boldly. "You won't get away with this. I have everything, the evidence to expose your lies." Haley's eyes flashed with sudden fury. "Do you really think you'll leave here alive again?" Before he could react, Frederick's father lunged, grabbing him roughly by the arm. Pain shot through him, but Frederick fought back desperately, kicking and struggling. The files scattered across the floor, evidence of their crimes spilling everywhere. Amid the chaos, Frederick saw Haley grab a sharp letter opener, advancing toward him with lethal intent. Panic surged violently within him. He twisted fiercely, breaking free from his father's grip just as Haley lunged. Her attack narrowly missed, the blade slicing the air inches from his face. His mother screamed angrily, diving toward the scattered documents. Frederick lunged too, grabbing crucial files and clutching them protectively to his chest. A deafening crash startled them all. The front door burst open, voices shouting, footsteps pounding toward them. Flashlights sliced through the room's darkness. As police officers surged inside, weapons drawn, commands ringing sharply through the chaos. "Hands up now." Haley dropped the blade instantly, her eyes wide with panic. Frederick's parents froze, caught red-handed. Frederick's heart thundered in relief, legs shaking violently beneath him. Behind the officers, a familiar figure appeared, limping but determined. "Leroy." Frederick breathed shakily, overwhelmed with relief and confusion. Leroy met his gaze briefly, remorseful, yet resolute. "They tried to silence me," Leroy explained hoarsely, "but I escaped. Told the police everything." Haley's expression twisted furiously, her voice shrill with desperation. "You traitor. You ruined everything." Frederick watched numbly as officers cuffed his family, their cries and protests meaningless now. Haley struggled fiercely, eyes filled with hatred and panic. His parents stared at him in stunned disbelief, their illusions shattered. Frederick stepped closer, confronting his father directly, voice trembling, yet strong. "All I ever wanted was your acceptance. Instead, you betrayed and discarded me. Now, you'll face justice." His father looked away bitterly, silent defeat etched across his face. Frederick turned to Haley, whose tearful pleas fell on deaf ears. "You traded everything real for a hollow lie, Haley. Was it worth destroying us all?" Haley's gaze wavered briefly, a flicker of regret in her eyes, quickly swallowed by defiance. "I did what I had to," she whispered bitterly. "You never understood ambition." "No," Frederick replied softly. "But now, you'll understand the consequences." Police led them away, the house falling eerily silent again. Frederick stood amidst the wreckage, shoulders sagging beneath emotional exhaustion. He looked toward Leroy, whose guilty expression revealed deep remorse. "I can't undo what I've done, Frederick," Leroy said quietly. "But maybe somehow, you can forgive me one day." Frederick considered him silently before finally nodding slowly. "Maybe someday. For now, I appreciate your courage." Outside, lights flashed across the night, illuminating neighbors' shocked faces gathered to witness the unfolding drama. Frederick stepped into the crisp air, breathing deeply, the weight of betrayal finally lifting slightly. He'd survived, faced his family's darkest secrets, and emerged intact. The climax of their deception had brought devastating truth, but also a powerful clarity. Hours later, sitting alone in an interrogation room, Frederick recounted every painful detail, offering police the carefully gathered documents Leroy had guided him to. Authorities confirmed the depth of his family's treachery, including insurance fraud, attempted murder, and embezzlement schemes intended to frame him. Frederick's innocence was undeniable now, his name cleared decisively. As dawn approached, Frederick finally left the station, stepping into sunlight that felt brighter, warmer than before. Leroy waited quietly nearby, visibly shaken but grateful. Frederick approached him carefully, meeting his gaze directly. "What will you do now?" Leroy sighed deeply. "Face my part in all this. But first, I wanted you to know I'm truly sorry. I never wanted to hurt you, Frederick." Frederick studied him thoughtfully before nodding. "You made terrible choices, Leroy, but in the end, you chose honesty. That's something." They parted ways quietly, Frederick's heart feeling both lighter and heavier simultaneously. Justice had prevailed, yet the scars remained deep. He knew healing would take time, trust difficult to rebuild, but facing his family's betrayal head-on had given him a sense of strength he'd never known. Frederick returned to the park, where he'd once sat broken, contemplating the horrors of his betrayal. Now, beneath gentle sunlight, he felt transformed. The climax of his ordeal hadn't destroyed him. Instead, it forged resilience within him, empowering his future. He opened a fresh notebook he'd carried everywhere, pen hovering thoughtfully over blank pages. For the first time, words flowed effortlessly, emotions translating beautifully into prose. He poured out every feeling: anger, betrayal, fear, and ultimately hope. As he wrote, Frederick realized something profoundly powerful. His family's cruelty hadn't erased him. Rather, it uncovered his true worth. His phone buzzed gently. A message from Leroy appeared. "Whatever happens, thank you for giving me a chance to redeem myself. You're stronger than anyone I've known." Frederick smiled faintly, typing a simple reply. "We both have scars, Leroy. Let's use them to become better." Sitting quietly, Frederick allowed peace to finally seep into his soul, replacing the bitterness he'd carried. His family's betrayal had nearly destroyed him, but through confronting their darkest truths, he'd found liberation. The climax had tested him profoundly, yet it also illuminated his resilience, courage, and unwavering ability to endure. Frederick had survived, emerging wiser, stronger, and ready to rebuild. His greatest realization was that he needed no validation from those who'd harmed him. The future belonged solely to him, unburdened by shadows of deception. He'd risen from betrayal, triumphant, reborn not from vengeance, but from strength. Forged through adversity, Frederick stood quietly at the edge of his parents' estate, watching solemnly as authorities sealed off the mansion, once a place filled with hollow laughter and cold affections, now reduced to an empty shell haunted by the shadows of betrayal. His pulse steadied, his breathing calm, as though each slow breath released him further from their toxic hold. Justice had finally been served. The weight of deception no longer chained him. In the weeks following the shocking revelations, his parents and Haley had been swiftly prosecuted. The evidence Frederick and Leroy provided was undeniable, airtight. Haley's false tears and his parents' pleas of ignorance fell on deaf ears as the court sentenced them. Frederick sat silently throughout, his dignity unshaken, finding peace in witnessing accountability unfold. Their stunned faces, the realization dawning that they'd been exposed by the son they had discarded, brought Frederick a quiet, profound satisfaction. As for Leroy, he had openly confessed his role, receiving a lighter sentence due to his cooperation. Frederick chose forgiveness over anger, understanding the torment Leroy now endured from guilt. They'd never regained their old friendship, yet an unspoken respect lingered between them, a bond born from mutual suffering and redemption. Months passed swiftly, each day filled with efforts to rebuild his shattered life. Frederick threw himself into writing, channeling his trauma and resilience into powerful prose that captivated audiences worldwide. His story, a gripping account of betrayal, survival, and eventual triumph, struck a chord deeply within readers. The media soon embraced him, celebrating his courage and resilience, and readers flooded him with heartfelt messages of support and admiration. But Frederick's journey wasn't just about fame or recognition. It was about reclaiming his identity and strength. One rainy afternoon, he stood nervously in front of an auditorium filled with people who'd followed his story closely. As he stepped onto the stage, applause thundered through the room. Frederick's heart swelled, knowing these strangers respected him more genuinely than his family ever had. He spoke openly, his voice clear, steady, filled with quiet strength. As he recounted his experiences, "I thought my family's betrayal would destroy me," he admitted, gazing into the captivated audience. "But instead, it became my greatest teacher. Their cruelty taught me the importance of self-worth, resilience, and standing firm in the face of darkness." When the applause finally died down, Frederick noticed a familiar face in the audience, Leroy. After the event concluded, they met outside the auditorium. Beneath gentle evening rain, "Frederick," Leroy began hesitantly, "you inspired me more than I can explain. Because of you, I started speaking publicly about how easily good people can lose their way and how vital it is to seek redemption. I owe you more than I could repay." Frederick smiled genuinely, warmth replacing bitterness. "You found the courage to admit your mistakes openly, Leroy. You faced consequences head on. That's rare. Redemption doesn't erase pain, but it heals." They parted with a handshake, symbolizing closure and mutual respect. Frederick walked home slowly, savoring the fresh air and the cleansing feeling of closure. He'd lost a family bound by blood yet devoid of loyalty, but he'd gained something far more valuable: self-respect and a genuine sense of worth. Months later, Frederick stood once more before the family mansion, now up for sale to repay debts and restitution ordered by the court. He stepped inside, walking through the silent halls that held memories of cold indifference. Entering Haley's room, he saw faded trophies, medals, and carefully arranged awards. Yet none brought comfort or warmth. These relics symbolized ambition without integrity, success without heart. In contrast, Frederick's room, though sparse and neglected, still contained his old notebooks filled with thoughts, dreams, and authentic creativity. He gathered them carefully, feeling gratitude towards his younger self, who'd kept writing despite endless discouragement. These pages were proof that even in darkness, he'd always carried a spark of hope and strength. Frederick decided then to purchase the property anonymously, a symbolic act of reclaiming his past and transforming it into a beacon of hope. Months of renovation followed, removing every trace of his family's corruption. Instead, he established a retreat for artists, writers, and survivors of emotional trauma, a sanctuary where people could heal, create, and rediscover themselves. The place that had been his personal hell became a haven for others. As Frederick inaugurated the retreat, he spoke calmly, confidently, before gathered guests and media. This home once represented manipulation, betrayal, and cruelty. Today it transforms into a place of healing, creativity, and genuine human connection. "I stand here not as a victim, but as a survivor, proof that even from darkness, we can rise and illuminate the world." The applause that followed reverberated with deep respect, admiration, and gratitude, overwhelming him emotionally. In that moment, Frederick felt closure, a powerful, satisfying end to his journey of suffering. He had survived betrayal, overcome despair, and reshaped his trauma into hope. His ultimate revenge was not punishment or bitterness, but reclaiming and transforming his painful past into meaningful purpose. In the years that followed, Frederick's retreat became a renowned haven, drawing survivors and artists from all walks of life. Each guest found strength in Frederick's story, inspired by his quiet courage and resilience. Books were written, lives transformed, all stemming from Frederick's decision to reclaim his truth instead of surrendering to despair. One peaceful evening, Frederick sat alone by the retreat's garden fountain, watching stars glimmer gently above. He had achieved more than he'd ever imagined, success not built on superficial praise but genuine respect, integrity, and purpose. His heart felt content, finally unburdened by past bitterness. As the retreat's community flourished, Frederick occasionally received updates about his family's fate. His parents remained imprisoned, bitterness marking their faces. Haley's superficial charm had faded, replaced by regret and solitude. Frederick felt neither pity nor satisfaction in their suffering, only quiet acceptance. They had chosen their path, and he had chosen his. Yet one chilly autumn afternoon, Frederick received an unexpected letter from Haley. He hesitated briefly before opening it, unsure what to expect. Inside, her words surprised him, filled not with excuses, but with genuine remorse. "Frederick," the letter began, "every day, I reflect upon what we did to you, the pain we caused. In prison, I've finally understood the emptiness of my ambition, the cruelty of our betrayal. Your forgiveness may be impossible, but I want you to know I'm genuinely sorry. You've become the kind of person I always wished I could be: strong, respected, and genuinely loved. I envy you that, but more importantly, I respect you deeply for it. Frederick folded the letter gently, a mixture of relief and finality washing over him. Haley's remorse, even if late, was genuine. Though forgiveness would take time, the acknowledgement alone felt healing. Years later, Frederick stood again before an auditorium filled with young survivors and dreamers. His hair grayed gracefully at the temples, wisdom and peace marking his gentle expression. He spoke softly, powerfully, concluding his speech with profound conviction. Your past may wound you, but it cannot define you. You hold the power to transform your pain into strength, betrayal into wisdom, darkness into light. I stand here as proof that no betrayal, no cruelty, can extinguish the resilience of the human spirit. Your ultimate revenge isn't hatred or bitterness, it is success, happiness, and living fully, defiantly, in the face of darkness. As the audience rose in heartfelt applause, Frederick felt true fulfillment. His journey through betrayal had come full circle, ending not in bitterness, but in profound healing and empowerment. The ultimate revenge was the incredible life he'd built from the ruins they'd left him, filled with authenticity, joy, and deep connections born from genuine love and trust. That evening, beneath a gentle twilight sky, Frederick sat beside the retreat's fountain, his heart peaceful and fulfilled. He had rewritten his story, a powerful legacy built not on vengeance but on resilience, courage, and compassion. As stars filled the heavens, Frederick smiled softly, knowing the darkness had been his greatest teacher. He had survived, conquered, and ultimately found closure, not through retribution, but through creating something meaningful and beautiful from betrayal. He whispered quietly into the peaceful night, words meant only for himself, but carrying the strength of his entire journey. Thank you, darkness, for showing me the true meaning of strength. Thank you, betrayal, for teaching me to value myself. Now, finally, I am truly free. With these words, Frederick closed his eyes, breathing in deeply the fresh air of new beginnings. His past had wounded him, yet also liberated him. His revenge was his peace, his legacy was hope, and his closure was finally complete.